Hi, editing Beth here. You're gonna see in this video how I kind of slowly progress throughout a weekend. Basically, I start off innocently enough. I'm just going to do some scanning because that's nice and relaxing. And then it just takes a whole turn. I think you might be able to see when it happens. I'm not sure. But I will be cutting in and out of this video as I react to this video. So just, yeah, bear with me here. It's me processing things as I go along. There was no script. It'll be pretty obvious right away. There was no script. Anyway, and now to the video. Hi, I'm back again. And this time I'm going to be talking about one of the stories of my father's that I'm working on. It's one of the more significant ones. It's really huge. It's got a lot of world building in it. It was basically my dad trying to be Tolkien. Neither here nor there. He was a linguist, so it kind of fits. But these were also really important to me as stories because he would tell me these stories when I was a kid. So getting back to them is kind of interesting, if you will. But it's a funny story. Pretty much all of them they were all like, and I did an unboxing video when I first got everything, but this is what everything is basically on, now that you can't even get this kind of paper anymore, but it's like a proper bond paper, but you can tell it's yellowed. The reason why it's yellowed is because this thing is at least 40 years old. Yeah, so, and when I say 40, possibly even 50, 40 or to 50 years old, because some of these things were written back when he was a paratrooper in the military back in like 68. So a while ago. What I'm going to be doing is I do need to scan these all in. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm kind of going to be reacting to them, and at some point I'm going to be reading these, like reading each of the stories. That's for later though. I just want to get these all scanned. Now, I theoretically went through, oh good. I went through and I wrote a checklist. I know it's just really scribbly, you can't tell. But this is my checklist on all the manuscripts from the story. Now, they're just basically called either the Alsbanian Tales or the Avantir Chronicles, depending on which story sections we're talking about. The easiest way to describe it is there's a sort of power. It's getting passed on from one guardian to another, and they use it to keep evil at bay, basically. That's a really simplistic thing. He had worked on languages, and there's like a whole runic alphabet involved. It's really, really ornate. But today I just was gonna take time, and I guess, I don't know, I felt like I needed to record this. Maybe I didn't, but I guess, well, what I'll do is I think I'll just at least talk about like each of the stories that I'm like scanning today, although editing Beth here again. Oh boy. Okay, so I like how I was so very optimistic that I was going to be scanning things that day, because that's not what this video ends up being about. This is not that. If you were expecting me to be like reacting to me scanning stories and giving my thoughts on it, that's not what this is. Okay. Here's the thing. I have to try and find them because I have a checklist and I don't necessarily know where they are. They need to be on my hard drive. in PDF format. And one of the first ones says, oh, it's called Tale of the Axe. And I'm really, really hoping this is a Dwarven story. It'd be really, really cool. Okay. Yeah, it says it says that it was scanned in. I don't know where it is. That is a problem. Yeah, and so there's also not just this, like there's like a lot more manuscript, because there's like I could pull all it out, but it's a lot. What I was originally doing was I have the Guardian of the Sword, which is chronologically first, and obviously talking about the Guardian. But there's like, I realized it this morning that there's like 3 or 4 different manuscripts, and I've only really scanned in one. I only worked on one, and I think it would probably, well, I'll use that word, behoove me to look at all of the manuscripts and try and put them together. I still want to put out the book as is, like this first one, because I think it's the most finished story, and it was like, well, like it was, I really liked the way the formatting went. So there's that. Yeah, so I want to try and I'm going to go over that. I want to compare it to the older manuscripts, see what's different about all of them. And I want to get, basically my goal will be to get as much world building information out of those and somewhere in a main place. I have a binder for this series. It's pretty, it's a big binder because I know I'm gonna have a lot of stuff in it, and that's one of the things I want to do today is try and like interconnect things, like, and that's why I'm doing the video. I'm not doing the video really to like share news. I'm doing it because I kind of need to process what I'm doing, and I'm talking it out, and unfortunately here you are. Sorry. I'm going to be scanning these. As I'm scanning them, I'm going to write the title, what the story is about, and I'm going to put it all into the binder so I can kind of try and figure out where they are, because I'm trying to, like, there is an overarching timeline, but the timeline doesn't have the main stories in it. They sort of do, but not all of the stories. Like, there's only the one story that shows up in this timeline. So I really have to try and I need to get this timeline out. I might actually just redo the like follow the timeline, but just like, okay, so this is this, and then like be able to correlate any stories that are, because I have all these short stories and I can see where they fit in the timeline. And I want to do that. Why am I doing it? Because it's a Saturday and I'm bored. But also because I know that I'm going to need, I want to do more storytelling. Yeah, because this wasn't enough. I want to do more storytelling around it. I want to bring in, because it was originally written back in the 60s, and we've come a long ways in the 60s. And even though he's putting it from a sociological standpoint and more of a, like, basically he was trying to recreate Tolkien going through his process and how he approached it from a linguistics matter and him studying the people, and these are his the legends of the people. And I wanted to bring a feminine perspective to it because it was all written by middle-aged white guy. Now, of course, I'm gonna have my own bias. I'll have my own biases, but I want to try and bring at least more, like, what happened to all the women. What did they do? Because there are mentions, there's mention of women. What was their role? I mean, their role wasn't just, you know, we're gonna sit, do diddly squat while guys are off doing stuff. What did they do? How did they support? Like, what kind of, it's going to be different storytelling. What I'm pulling from that is I'm going to be doing a bunch of research into feminine history, like women's history basically, to try and piece in how other people they've written about women in history, from more of a traditional all the way to like modern times. How are we viewing women historically now? And I want to bring that into the story because I feel like it needs to happen, you know. And in my wildest dreams, what would be really cool is to be able to bring on, is to have other people, and it would be like people like just, you know, POC, Indigenous people, and just like a whole bunch of different people from different countries, different nationalities, different everything, to be able to like tell their own stories in their own way through this world, because I know that that's what he was trying to do, but it's very limited in his viewpoints from when he from, you know, just him growing up. He was born in the 40s, so there's like prejudices that happen just based on where you are in the world. No matter how open you want to be, it's just systemic stuff that just needs to be broken down. I'm still too far removed. I'm like ancient myself, so, you know, I'm working on it, doing what I can. And I think this is part of my way of trying to like build on that and trying to be more inclusive of everybody. Because, yeah. But I know I babbled on about that, but it was really important to me because that's part of what I'm going to be building on, the stories I want to be telling. Hi. So the next piece you're going to see is me reading the Dwarven Story. Not even all of it, just like the first little snippet of it, because it's fairly long, and I realized that as I was about to start reading it that it was going to take a really long time to read, so I just kind of read the first snippet of it, just enough to confirm that yes, it is in fact the story of the dwarves. The tale, as it is told each year at the Feast of the Axe among Relic's people. It tells of the gathering of the people and the glory and the sorrow of Relic of the Axe, who led them out of the shadow of darkness. Yes, this is a dwarf story, so yeah, alrighty, and I have to try and find it, so this will be fun. I'm gonna actually probably put this on pause for a minute while I try and get everything together, because I need to get my notebook that has everything in it. Anyway, I'll be back. Okay, so what I did between shots was instead of actually getting everything ready to go, I got distracted and I started doing an updated list, basically so I can also figure out where the files are, because there's like a check mark saying that it says according to this, it says that I scanned it in, but it's not where it's supposed to be. Where? Well, I have several different places it could be. I have my computer, I have my laptop, I have on my desktop, I have 2 hard drives, like external hard drives, outside of the 2 internal hard drives. I don't put anything on one of the hard drives, so that narrows it down. The other and could be on 2 different drives, probably not. And then finally, it could also be in my Dropbox folder, so I have to locate it, which is why my updated list has where are the files. If I don't have like a list of where the files are specifically, then I have to count it that it hasn't been scanned in and needs to be scanned in properly. Plus, I didn't have, like, this old list doesn't have all the different versions of the Guardian. Now, here's the thing. A lot of Uber planning and it sounds like I'm just sort of, but right now I'm allowing myself to go in the rabbit hole because it's the weekend and I don't want to actually do work. I'm trying to like not work. So falling down a rabbit hole of researching and sorting and organizing is really not a problem because this is not productive. It will be probably, but at the same time, it's a lot of fun because I get a chance to read stories. Who doesn't love to read stories? And yeah, and like I said, I want to try and make sense of the notes that he has, try and organize it more, make it more. I know what I want to build. Basically, it comes back to D&D really. There is this old supplement. Now, people will recognize the name as soon as I say it and think I'm talking about something totally different. But back in the 70s, there was a box set. There was a companion to D&D called the World of Greyhawk. I know, you're like, but wait. No, but this is different. It was really well set up because what it did is it had a description of all the different people of Greyhawk, and then basically their system of government, whether they're friendly or not friendly, that sort of thing. And it's amazing to take that as a template for doing organizing of a world, for me anyway. I've done it to build other worlds. I've used it as like a template for building other worlds when I was gaming. And when I'm dealing with something like this that's unwieldy, it needs to be everything needs to kind of make as much sense as anything does in the world. Then I'm going to be using that as a template to try and sort and organize. But that's another story and another video. But I just wanted to give a quick update that I got completely derailed and that this is a weekend of being derailed. And I'll just record it because, like I said, just trying to get my thought process and to talk it out loud, basically to talk it out. So I will give you a quick update as I go along. I'll probably just do a bunch of these little tiny short things. But yeah, for now, I'm gonna grab a quick breakfast and I'll be right back. Hi. So as I'm going, I'm finding myself kind of not staying on track very well. I haven't really done any scanning yet because it's a lazy day. And I had to have breakfast and whatnot. But I'm back at it. I pulled out the timeline and a whole entire different idea came because my dad didn't just have this. He had like a whole bunch of novels he did. But there was this one story and it's called The Sword of Justice. And I always thought in the back of my head that it could fit because there's just certain elements that kind of come over from the Avantir Chronicles to this story. And I think I figured out how I can mesh them, where the bridge is. That's not helpful. That's completely a sidetrack. I have to write it down somewhere and make a note of that. But it is part of what's going on here, which is indicative of me saying that I'm going to be all over the place with this because it's just going to see where my brain is taking me on this little path today. And you get to come along with me. So, yeah. I guess I should start at the beginning though, because I'm just talking about this story and I'm not saying what the story is. Well, I told you the story is about a sword, but it's not just about the sword. It's about like a general battle against good and evil, but it it spans a bunch of different people's lives. It starts off with Rorik. So I'm just gonna read the first part of like my dad's synopsis and some notes on the story. So in early 1963, I began to write a quasi-adventure story. The kindest comment on which would be that it was my first effort. I was a young signalman at the time, posted to Kingston, which provided all the setting for the story. I was posted to Calgary in September of the same year, and about the middle of the next March, I was at Rivers, Manitoba, undergoing parachute training. I had borrowed a typewriter from a friend and resolved to type up this first story, which I did, finishing it in just a few days before we made our last jump. However, it was too long to attempt to sell immediately, so I decided to do a short story first and see what I could do. Upon arriving back at Calgary, I began the story of Rorik and the Sword of Arvindal. As it continued, it became obvious that it was no short story, because I was on page 30, written longhand on a small writing pad, and was still far from finished. I decided to write it up into a book. As I rode with Rorik and Connell on the path of freedom, things came up which had little to do with the story itself. Connell the wild, Kale of Versick, Ikar the farmer, the old island, Garthel, Furdick fight, Thummel of the Three Rings, all showed themselves. Horrigon was mentioned, but not by name, and the story of the dwarves and the Arkbazd Wazar and the great green other people were mentioned briefly. The Vakans mentioned, and Donald the Bane came to Rorik at Orden. The elder folk received a bare mention in the form of Loranan, or Lorandon, and Troyan and Berhandan, along with a few songs identified as elder songs. There were one or two mentions of Amerlin, Ledu Andan, the wandering wizard, and a foretelling of Rorik, the Iron Hand, and the battle against the darkness. By the time I had written this book out in longhand, I was already, in my mind, going over the story of Darkon and the kingship of Avantir. It got me first as a sort of story about the time of the falling of an empire. But Amerlin's coming was tied with something greater, which finally came out. Anthropology interested me, so I worked out the approximate customs of all the mentioned races, and tied in with it came their languages. It seemed, though, too great an undertaking for one young signalman with a pen and writing pad. It'd be senseless for me to deny that I was inspired by the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. I was, but not for plot. I was, but not for plot. I read his Lord of the Rings twice while I was still in Calgary, and after the second time I was beginning to like them. Then, shortly after being posted to Shiloh, Manitoba, I bought a typewriter and wrote out the story of the Hygerian War several times, finally coming up with what I thought was a fairly good story. However, I was still working out the big story, wishing there was any chance at all for a story as long as it promised to be. Then, The Lord of the Rings came out in paperback. On an impulse, I bought them, and this time, the story came out naturally and easily. I could see how good it was. It did more, too. I decided if one book of that size could be written, then by all the powers above, so could another. So Randall rode out of Corral, leaving Malak the Insane on the throne behind. Darkon watched things happen from the death of Ross and Kithian to the betrayal of Randall and Arden by Kedrix, servant of Malak. To Darkon fell the privilege of the barony of Avantir, that was more like a burden. The sword was his, and the responsibility of uniting the eastern part of Elspen to stand alone. Amerlin, though, had come to help him, and with his counsel, the young Vakan forged a kingdom, but a kingdom which stood by the strength of his sword arm alone. There you go. So yeah, then there's more and more and more, but I just figured I'd read the first page of it. I'll read more of this later, but yeah, basically it just sort of has the beginnings of his notes and kind of his initial thoughts on what he was writing. It sounds like there might have actually been another other story, that like a book that is now lost to time and I would have to recreate, which I'm up for a challenge. There's a whole bunch of like the base notes here, so I think if I were to like go through everything, study it very, very carefully and write everything down, I can kind of walk it back from there and have like the story, because I have like, that's just the thing. I have how many pages here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 pages of like literally a timeline. Like it's like year 1, year 3, year 4, year 6, year 7, year 9, 11, 13, like up to, because I think that then it becomes 0 and starts up again. No, we're at 300. Oh, there we go. And then year of the kingdom from the year of Connell's command. So in 453, question mark, because they aren't sure, Connell becomes leader of the clan. Once he becomes leader of the clan, then the numbering system of the years started up, because apparently they decided he was so great that that's the way that goes. So, and like I said, this is this is a timeline that I want to try and fit all the books into, like, because I have Guardian of the Sword and I have Avantir. Those are the 2 full books that I do know that I have. I've scanned in both of them. Guardian, I'm just currently working on final edits on for this version. There's gonna be multiple versions because, like I said, there's still I think at least 2 other versions of the manuscript, and I want to kind of review them all and see if there's anything better. So having said that, I'm gonna probably just sit and do some, well, I also was going to do some scanning, which the scanning and locating files and organizing, I don't know, it's interesting to me, and I'll probably like cut in again, because I'm not really good at the stop motion of you like sitting there watching me just sort of staring at a computer monitor or just sort of poring over pages. I don't know. Anyway, I will give you another update in a little bit. Okay, so I'm back and yay! I just went through all afternoon. I basically went through all of just quickly skimming. I didn't get a chance to reread. I'll be reading so much of it after I get everything all scanned in. But what I did was I took all of this is now in order. Everything in this folder is now ordered chronologically. So excited. That means that now all I have to do is simply scan in order, and it'll be the order of the timeline, roughly, more or less. Better than it was before, which was not at all. But now that I have my timeline to go off of, well, I already had the timeline to go off of, but now that I've like ordered when I think, like, most of the stories are actually fairly straightforward. A couple of them are a little like, but that's fine. Some of them are really, really obvious, which helps put everything else in order. And then I can also look at it because there's still like things that happen that people talk about, but there's no story about yet. So I can work on those too. Like, there's just so much to work on with this, and I really, really love that. It's one of my favorite parts about this, is that it's just, it sparks my imagination and it gets me going on more and more things. It's just like they have these, basically some of these earlier stories are just like, they're like poems. So it's just poems that talk about, you know, like lays from Norwegian stories. But yeah. Hi, Editing Beth here again. So I'm about to start talking about a Dwarven smith. I believe he's a Dwarven smith. I'm not sure when I'm talking about it, but basically it's one of the stories I came across and I got off on a tangent about it and how I wanted to turn it into a story. But I wasn't really clear on the transition because I was just talking about scanning things and all of a sudden I jump into, oh, look, there's a story about a dwarf. So that's where my mind went. It needs a little bit of an introduction because I just sort of hop from one idea to the other. So that's where I start talking about, for example, this is a story that I can take and turn into, or this is a poem I can take and turn into a story. Okay, there you go. Almarn. He was a smith. I'm just not sure whether he was a Dwarven smith or a human smith. I don't know. But I'm excited about this because I can take this story, I can take this poem, and then I can turn it into a story. Yay! Which will be what happens, because that's what he did with a bunch of these. He like started off with poems out of them and then spun them into the stories. So that makes it easy because then it's kind of like it's already got its little outline, but it's like outline in the form of a poem. So that's that. Yeah, and I think that's gonna pretty much wrap up this video for today. So thank you for tuning in. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And are you working on any stories right now that involve outlining, or have you ever outlined from a poem, like really unusual ways of outlining? Just comment in the thingy below. Alrighty, take care.